design, UI. So my name is Samuel. I'm your instructor, your primary instructor for UI UX track. Uh, yes, let's get to it. So user interface design. Uh, I don't know what would come to your mind when you think about user interface design. Like we have three words there. We have the user, we have an interface, and we have design. And if you think about it, interface basically is what you interface with, what you are used to have access to something. And in UI UX, user interface basically refers to the visuals. In this particular slide, you can see the visual visual design of these three different products, these three different platforms. You can see the color, you can see the text, you can see the illustration, you can see how they move around, you can see how each button, each interaction would behave. This is UI design. Core of UI design is about creating visually appealing designs that solve problems, of course, and that is usable with the users in mind. So, what is UI UX design? So, at the core of UI UX design, just like I said just now, is to create visually appealing designs. But of course, UI, because user interface design is not just limited to just websites. Interface design also covers apps, mobile apps. It also covers TV design, anything that's to do with digital design, digital visual design. You would involve that involves some sort of UI design because you're creating interface for the internet for the digital space. So you would have something similar to what you would have on the web or mobile. It's an icon, whether it is color or text or these components are all involved in creating visually appealing design. Goal is to create something that is visually appealing, is to create a good experience, visual experience, and also the goal is to solve problems. UI does not stand alone. Even if you are trying to focus on UI design, you need to understand the UX part of things to ensure that your designs are functional, your designs have experience. Because otherwise, you just be creating things that would look like graphic design and will not be usable by users. So as much as UI is focused on the visuals, UI is also trying to solve users' problem. So understanding how to solve problems is another core foundation of UI design. So when you think about UI design, what are the components of UI designs? And say in this particular design, we have texts, we have a background color. You can see it has different shades flowing all through the site. We have icons, we have the logos here, which of course we have the icon, the illustration, this big illustration here. You can see how all these components come together to form the design. So UI design basically is a combination of different components, pulling, bringing all of them together to create something that is accessible and usable for users, to helping them to interface with the technology, which is the internet. So interface is to ensure that users, otherwise, without an interface, without something visual for users to interact with, will be dealing with code. We'll be dealing with some sort of code that will be very technical, of course, for end users. But interface allows us to interact with the technology itself, to use the technology to solve our problems. What is the history of UI design? So when you think about UI design started with the internet, the computer actually. So when computer were created, initially it was purely technical. Only people who had technical knowledge could use the computer. But over time, with the first PC, that's personal computer in the 90s, there was need to create a sort of interface for people who are not technical to interact with the technology. So most times, if you check early designs, you discover that they were built to resemble the real world. The real world in the sense that they were, for example, of course, we still have some of these things in current designs today. For example, the recycle bin was meant to look like an actual bin, an actual waste bin, so that users can easily understand its function. And Air Windows tab was built to look like an office where you can see the folders. The folders were designed like actual folders. You can see here. This is what an actual folder looks like in an organization, and that is what is represented in the visual form, in the early form of the internet. And some of these things still hold true today, where we still have some of this um, presentation of the real world in the digital world to help users make that transition from what they understand in their day-to-day life, what they can easily interface with intuitively in the digital space. What are the components of UI design? So when you think about the UI design, just like I showed you earlier with that particular UI, you have typography, you have imagery, you have the input fields, and you have color, you have shapes. There are actually more, but I would focus on this for now, this particular class. So just like I said earlier, you see the image. This particular illustration here is an image. Image could be imagery, it could be image, it could be a video, it could be an illustration or some sort of motion graphics. All falls under imagery because it is another form of communication. When you see something like this, you understand that it has something to do with the Ethereum blockchain. It has something to do with processing. It has, you can see, a lot of moving parts. The image itself is communicating, it is passing information. And when you now combine it with the text, it all makes sense, and we're able to make sense of what this platform is about, the problem it is trying to solve, and how we can use it to meet our own needs. What are the rules of UI designers? When you think about UI design, we are isolating it from UX because it's possible for you to master UI design and get rules and get employed or take on projects and complete them. In big organizations, we have designers who are specialized in UI and designers who are specialized in UX and other forms of design, like even the UI user research part of design. We have specialist designers who would have to niche down to these core individual areas. And when that happens, each design, these different niche down forms of design have different functions they perform. On the UI end, the designer needs to be able to understand and interpret requirements. Requirements here could be user requirements. What kind of solution, what kind of features, what kind of things are we going to be building? And also we talk about engineering requirements. What technology are we using? What are the limitations we have on our engineering team? You consider that it's not that you can create one kind of interface that engineers cannot create, or will take in the engineers more time than it's available to create that design. We have to also consider the engineering technical requirements, and if there's enough technical resources to pull off that project. Also translating those design systems, the style guides, all those components in design, converting them into the interface that the end users will now interact with when it has been built out by the engineering team. UI designers are also responsible for creating the visuals. So when you create those screens, those UI screens, those interface, when you design them, you would have to prototype them. Prototyping basically means you are trying to demonstrate, create a just enough presentation of a solution for the users to be able to interact with and understand what you're trying to build. Users here are not necessarily end users, but here it could be the executive team, it could be the engineering team, especially engineering teams. You don't just give your screens, you just design design a website. You don't just give that to the engineering team. You have to prototype it, let them understand how the interaction will work. They click on this button, how would it behave? If they click on that text, what would happen? You use prototype to do that. Then also solving problems. Just like I said earlier, the core of design is solving problems. UI designers also are involved in the problem solving process. So what are the important skills of a UI designer? Of course, you have to be proficient in the tools of design. So when I say tools, I'm referring to things like Figma. There are other design tools actually beyond Figma. If you do not know, we have Adobe XD, which works on iOS as well as it works on the Mac as well as on Windows. Then we also have Sketch, which is purely wood, which will only works on Mac, as well as InVision. And there are others actually beyond this ones mentioned here. And of course, you have to understand UX. You have to understand how to create experiences that's, that will be useful and understandable by users. We'll talk more about interaction design later, but you have to understand how to create interactions. Interactions here basically means those individual points in the website that users are interacting with, like the buttons, the scroll, all those basic things that just the way users interact with the platform, the experience that get from it, and how to design that experience is what interaction design is about. So understanding those principles are very important. Of course, you have to have a good eye for aesthetics as well as attention for details. Of course, you would have to know how to collaborate with other stakeholders. When I talk about other stakeholders, we mean the UX, the product managers, PAS, all the other departments and parts of the that come other professionals that are on the team working towards achieving the goal of the company, right? Or if it's a personal project, fine. If it's not, you have to work with people and you'll be using collaborative tools. And you, as a designer, you have to understand how to use those tools. Yeah. At this point, I would like to just show us how to use Figma. This is going to be a quick one. I do not want us to waste time, but we'll just quickly browse through Figma. Earlier we mentioned that you should install Figma on your PC. If you or you should create an account. I'm sorry, create an account on Figma. If you did, then good. Would be going through some important features in Figma, how to use them. To know if you guys can see my Figma screen. Can you see another screen besides the presentation screen? I want a response on the chat, the UI UX chat channel. Can you see my Figma screen? Just drop a yes. Okay, yes, okay. So let's go through it quickly. No time to waste. So of course, when you create an account, this is what you would see. In my own case, we have some files that I've worked on, some projects I've done in the past. So you would see them down here. You can of course toggle the picture here to button this particular place. You just click on this arrow here. You can sort out the files based on, of course, these different orders. Then here see the teams. You can create a team. For example, you are working with a group of people. You're not the only designer, you're not the only engineer. Yeah, of course, you're working with engineers and other stakeholders. You create a team. Just click, if you scroll down, you can see the plus new team. You can create a team there. And with that team, you can use it to manage multiple projects and keep open multiple files. And also, there's something called FigJam. We'll explore it very soon in the same place so that the team will not have to you will not have to have different links pointing to the different files. Everything, the entire team can access all the different design files from one place. Another very core features of Figma is the community. Community is basically a repository of resources. So resources such as templates, widgets, plugins, everything. You can see some key resources that you can easily search for: design systems, wireframe, mobile web design. Any of this thing you search. For example, I'm clicking on typography. You can see people's work that have been published here. You can also publish your work here for others to use. If you click on any one, you can, for example, you click on this, you can duplicate. It will come into your own file, your own account, and you can duplicate, copy and paste that information and use it however you want. Okay, let's go back and look at something else. Also, you have this part. This is basically where you access some settings. I'm showing you here because if, for example, you are working on a project that require you to use a different, if you are working on a project that require you to use a different font that is not available on Figma, you would need a way to open that for that typeface to show on Figma. Figma has download option here. You can see here the fonts you download. When you click on this to download, when you download this, it allows you to be able to load your local fonts. Any fonts that you installed on your machine, it would be able to show that font in Figma so that you can use more fonts and download more fonts and have those fonts work for you when you are creating designs. And let's quickly talk a little bit about the different parts of the main the main design file. Currently loading a Figma file. So this part up here, let's look at where my mouse is pointing to. These are the major um, tools that you'll be using, right? So you have the frame. Frame basically allows you to create the sort of guide for your design. For example, if you are creating a mobile app, come here, where I clicked, you click on this particular frame. You have nothing selected, nothing would show. So you would have to either click here. If you click here, you see these options will appear, or if you have a frame that has already been created already, frame that's already been created, you click on it and you can scroll all the way down to pick any frame that you want to. For example, if you want to create a desktop design, you can come down to desktop. Should have desktop somewhere here. Okay, see desktop. You click on desktop and you have a frame that has the same width and height that is similar to a desktop. You can obviously stretch it for your site design. And also you can switch this to mobile. You can have something small for mobile. To have something for collaboration. Of course, before we go into collaboration, we have prototype. For example, you created multiple screens and you want to prototype them. You click on this. It allows you to join multiple together. You click on this and add them together. I sent a link to to a playlist of Figma videos. Please go there and watch. You learn how to prototype. You learn more about this tool. Of course, the inspection is for developers. So, if, for example, you created the design, when a developer clicks on it, they can see all the properties of that particular frame. So, the height, the width, the color you used, everything, they can easily see them and understand how they would be able to, how they can create those designs that how they can build that design, those designs that you've created. One of the beauty of Figma is that it's a collaboration feature in the sense that it allows you to collaborate with users, allows you to collaborate with others as a team remotely without the need for any sort of physical interaction. And part of this, the main features of that is the comments. Basically, comments allows you to drop feedback on particular points in a design. You can zoom in and put a particular point and drop a comment for the person who created it. Like, okay, maybe the color is not right, it's not accessible, reduce the font size, this is not the appropriate text, and all that. You can easily drop feedback, and the person will come in and respond to you. You can see when you drop a message, your profile on Figma will be the one that will be there. So anybody comes into this file, they know that okay, this person was one that dropped this comment. And on this side, see a list of all the comments and the chats that have been going on design file. And also we have this prototype. When you click on this, you can play a particular screen that you've created. This is a prototype feature. I mentioned how prototyping, how important it is in UI design. You use this tool to, you see the play button, this triangle here. When you click on it, it would load this particular frame and the contents of it. There are lots of features I cannot even touch all. I just wanted to give you an overview of Figma and what it's like. So we're going to go back quickly to the file, to our presentation, and continue. I want everyone to go through those videos I sent and understand the foundation, the basics of how to use Figma. Focus on Figma for now. If you know how to use Figma very well, fine. Help others who are having issues with maybe some tools or how to create one thing or the other. Just try and support and show concern, and let's see how to help everybody to move along in the program. Okay, so yeah, we talked about this. Yes, one more thing I didn't mention. Fig Jam. So Fig Jam is a tool that allows you for brainstorming. So this is Fig Jam here. I clicked on this new Fig Jam file. You click on this, it creates this. You can use this to brainstorm with your team to figure out, okay, create personas, all those UX deliverables. You come up with, you do your design sprint. There's something called design sprint where you work for a team come together for a few days. Actually, it's a week to work on a particular solution, come up with a problem that needs solution, and work to create that solution. And yes, let's just go back and continue. So yeah, let's we'll be going through the different components of design henceforth. We'll be touching in various levels of details, the different components of design. I'll try to be as fast as possible, as well as try to be understandable, so that we'll be able to get the most from this. So yeah, first we'll start with colors. Colors play a very important role in design, from designing based on the culture of the people that are going to be using your product, the people using this product, what country are they from, to designing based on the emotions you want to elicit and the kind of product solution you're trying to create. If you are creating a solution for women, it's most likely that you should be going towards colors that tend towards pink. Or if you are creating, basically you have to understand it's on the gender side, it's a bit tricky. So, but different colors mean different things, and you should understand how to use them to achieve your goal. And this is where research comes in. You explore the how people use different colors. For example, in tech, blue is one of the most used colors, from Facebook to Twitter. A lot of brands in tech space that use blue. And also, yeah, let's go into it and see more details about the color. So, color is a way we use to to elicit a particular feeling from users. So it has a psychological backing to it, in the sense that the color you use can, in one way or the other, affect how your users perceive your product or your solution or your website or mobile app. So there's a psychology, and there's lots of research that has gone into this. And based on that research, we have some principles that guide colors in design. So it takes only 60, 90 seconds for people to make a subconscious judgment about the product, and between 62% and 90% of that assessment is based on color alone. Some color com shows how important color is and how quick people can make decisions based on the colors you use on your design. Something called the color wheel. Basically, it's a representation of basic colors we have and how to combine those colors to create when creating designs. Because choosing color can be very hard and can prove really difficult, especially for designers. There's the using there's always the best way to go, which is to follow the using the color wheel, select colors based on their location in the wheel. We have complementary colors, selecting colors that are opposite each other, secondary colors. We also have analogous color as well as, yes. So I would talk more about this later when we actually get into the real design, where you can explore the color wheel. So we'll talk a little bit about the different colors. So we have red. So most of the color, the usage of red, it could be the shade rather of red, could be the crimson or the maroon or the vermilion. So this, it always has its interpretation, and depending on the culture and what you're using it for, it can be very, very attractive. Meaning, like, for example, if you notice when you talk of notifications are always designed with color red. Then you now have, okay, if you have two notifications, you have two in white text on it, because red stands out. Red wants to show itself, and it would show itself wherever you keep it, even if it is a small dot of red or it's a splash of red. In China, for example, red is used to represent happiness, good fortune, luck. So in the West, it is used to represent excitement, passion, but also danger. and also it is used right to red is also powerful and can be seen as sexy. In West Africa, the red in the flag in the West African in South sorry South African flag in South Africa, sorry, West the red in the South African flag is used to represent something else, something different from other cultures. It used to represent the bloodshed and the violence and sacrifice that the country went through. You can see that depending on where you are designing for, especially if you're working for a multinational company, you have to understand how to use color so that you will not get the wrong response from users and will not end up spoiling the entire solution you're trying to create. You have green. Green could come in mostly used as forest green, lime, as well as olive. Depending on how you use this color, it could also get different expression and different meaning. So in the United States and Europe, green can be used to endure relationship or just flourish, growth, nature, rebirth, everything that's to do with life, right? So in the Western world, we have that as major interpretation of green. But in places like South America, Europe, and also in Islamic countries, you can see a little bit of difference in terms of how they see it as something that's to do with health. And you have to understand how different cultures perceive colors. So next, we'll just look at different use cases. We have here yellow, and we have orange. Orange here is used to represent the autumn and harvest season in the west, and it is some sort of a um, religious color in other parts, especially in the Netherlands, where it's associated with with the king's birthday. And yes, so when, for example, if you're trying to create something for people in Netherlands, you know that if you're using orange and if you use it at the right time in the right place, you could get a lot of good positive response from the people. We also have blue. Blues can be associated with gentleness, with spontaneity, as well as also mean greed and duplicity. So what different cultures and different parts of the world represent, I'll see these colors as. So another thing I want us to look at is how is how colors are used in brands. We can see the representation of different colors in this particular chart. You can see we have a lot of companies that tend towards the blue, a lot of companies that tend towards the red, the orange, and depending on the industry you are designing for or the kind of solution you are creating, there are colors that are predominantly used that users are used to. When you're doing your research, you have to understand all these things, especially if there is no existing brand system in place, and you will have to choose the colors that you'll be using for the design yourself. So, for example, if you're designing for a food related product, it means that something that would tend towards orange or red would be much more um, exciting compared to using some other shades of colors. Then there's another, it's a rule called the 60 to 30-10 rule. Basically, it's how to combine different colors in your design. This is very important because even if, for example, you've decided, okay, I'm going to use this color, I'm going to use that color in my design, how do I combine them? Should I use them equally? Should I use one more than the other? How do I use these colors that I've selected? The 60-30 rule basically helps us guide or decide or to how to spread out the colors in our design. So 60 is a primary color. So the primary color, which is the color that would be used in most of the components of design, will take up 60% of the interface. Then the 30% will be the secondary color, which will take up also you take up a lesser portion of the design. Then the accent will be used in places like buttons or some other minor details that are not really occupying a lot of space or attention. You can use accent color, which is like if you are going to be introducing a third color. It's also advisable so many colors, because if you do use multiple colors, it will end up creating a situation where you would have users confused on what kind of emotions or what exactly are you trying to do. It can become really chaotic if you do not combine them well. So it's advisable to stick to at least two colors and find a way to you decide, of course, which will be primary and which will be secondary. We'll move over to shapes. So shapes are basically building blocks. Everything is made up of shapes, from the text to, of course, lines to the actual shapes. Everything around us at its basic level is a shape. Either it is 3D or it is two-dimensional. So we have two types of, or we could see shapes from two perspectives, right? We could see shapes for as a simple form. Okay, so you can see at the simple form, which is like the foundational level form of shapes. Basically, this would refer to, of course, square, circle. Also, when referring to this basic shape, triangle, and the rest, it's that it is in two-dimensional, like something like this, just square, or it is in their three-dimensional forms. They all fall under simple shapes. Then compound shapes are basically when you combine these shapes together, like we have in this particular design. You see where it's a combination of triangles, circles, as well as squares to create these beautiful designs, and also polygon. When you combine multiple shapes together to create something, it falls under compound shapes. We have square. Here we'll be looking at the different, some found some shapes and what they mean in terms of their interpretation and how we can use that to create design. So we have squares. So square is used to, it's basically the building block. For example, if you're creating anything we create at its core is made up of squares. That it is here square would could also be seen as some sort of rectangle as well, but basically four-dimensional shape for a shape with four sides. Sorry, when we use squares, it is always used to interpret to mean stability, rigidity, heaviness, reliability, strength, and seriousness. So for circle kind of on the opposite end of square, because in fact when you're using Figma, for example, and also the same thing with other design tools, you for you to move between, you can convert a square to a circle by holding onto the edges and dragging it in. So to some extent, it negates the square in terms of how it is perceived. So when you think of square, you're of circle rather, you think about how round it is, and it's always moving. Think about the football. The football is round. Football moves. Think about the sun. Sun is round. The sun moves. So it can also be used to interpret motion, because to interpret movement. So we think about the sun. Think about lightness. Think about happiness, softness, innocence, movement, as well as infinity. We have triangles. So triangles reminds us of a spearhead. So basically, when you think about triangles have sharp edges, basically pointy edges. And that pointy edges have interpretation. So when you think about that, you consider the pyramid of Egypt, the way it was built in it, and the fact that to a large extent it represents divinity. Think about Christianity. We talk about the God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost. So 3 points. So divinity, balance, and because if you notice, because we have one central point here, then we have two in the at the bottom. So there's this sort of balance where it sits properly on the ground. Of course, danger. It has a pointy end, and it can be used to represent some sort of risk or danger that's approaching. We have organic shapes. Organic shapes are shapes that are not do not have sharp edges. They are not basically follow. They don't fall under the triangle, square, and circle category, right? They are shapes that are more fluid in their look. So, for example, you can look at these, all the edges rounded. It has no sharp points, or it doesn't. It sort of flows and molds itself depending on on where it is and how it wants to behave. So when it use organic shapes, it would use to interpret freedom, nature. Of course, nature are not built. It's not made up of boxes. It folds and it is rounded. It is basically it comes in different forms and different style and different arrangements. And we see that in organic shapes. That's why they are organic. They represent nature, flow, delicate, unpredictability. So in this particular example, we see how triangle is used in this first design. Use of triangle to create this illustration. And when you see this kind of um, illustration, first thing that come to your mind will be like danger. Of course, this woman looks like some sort of wicked lady that there's this thing in Nigeria called Lady Koi Koi. And if you look at the image, to some extent, it has that semblance to Lady Koi Koi. So that danger comes in there basically because of the pointy nature of the illustration, right? And in the second design, you see how there's this balance between trees, which are pointy, and the flood of water coming in. Then we see a beautiful, perfect representation of organic design, organic shapes in this lady illustration here, where the shape basically curve and bend at different points to create this elegant and simple illustration. You can see how blocks, basically shapes like squares, are used to create bold and stand out design. So, for example, this at its core, this particular title are blocks, and blocks that will be squares. And once you see it, it is bold. It is on your face right there. When designers know how to work with imagery, so we'll be moving over from squares to imageries. Imageries here, like I mentioned earlier, would cover videos, images, of course, as well as illustrations. So when this is a quote by Ryan Dutra. So when designers know how to work with images, they have a better they are better able to manipulate the emotions and reaction of audience. Product designers can rise and fall on the quality of their user experience images and the rest. So images play a very important role, like I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation. From an image, just like the saying goes, an image tells if a picture tells 1,000 stories, right? We can make a lot of stories and make a lot of judgment and interpretation just from an image. When it comes to using image in design, you have to be very intentional about the quality, about the particular image we use and how we use it. This particular design, this particular image here, if you visit unrealengine.com, you would find this. It is their banner, the hero. You'll find this in the hero section of the website. Very, very clear video of the Unreal Engine software and basically the environment that was created with the tool. When you see this, you would get to appreciate the real engine or the Unreal Engine and what you can achieve with it. It tells the story of Unreal Engine in its entirety because when you see it basically tells you that you can create this beautiful environment, the beautiful 3D environment with Unreal Engine. And that is enough to sell you to figure out how to use Unreal Engine to build something as beautiful as this. It's a video actually. And when you think about this one, well, with the title here, with great design comes great response. You can see a very huge gush of water in the background. Depending on the message you're trying to communicate, the background image would help communicate to users what the platform or the website or mobile app is about. When we think about images, we also have to consider how we design avatars, the shape and the location of avatars and how we use them in design is also very important. Imagery also covers icons and also cover banners. Icons here we have to consider the how understandable is our icon. So if you want to create an icon to represent an a a location, maybe you want users to put in their address at a particular point. The icon you use at that particular type, that form field will help users to know if what they can do with that particular element in your design. So there's always you have to ensure that you create a balance between icons that are too detailed and icons that are too simple. So your illustration should be easy to interpret. If users cannot understand what your icons mean within the first few seconds, then it is your illustration is it's not serving its purpose, and you should consider changing it or working on that illustration. That's icon, sorry. So when do we use imagery in your UI design? So we use imagery to showcase products, to showcase a particular scenario or a particular um, basically to describe things, to explain things. We use imagery to also create that wow moment. Like when you watch the video on the website or you see that image, it's like wow. When you visit the Unreal Engine, you understand what I mean in terms of when you see that video, there's this wow moment that like, oh, this is beyond, like this is crazy. So you could do this much with this tool. Then you could use it to create that wow moment. You can use it to create that to describe a product. For example, if it's an e-commerce website, image is very important. Create that design the card where people will add to carts and all that. You have to display the image of the product people are buying. In other context, whatever the business or the website is selling or the app is selling, displaying image is very important. You have to ensure that the image has the right shape, the right proportion, and the right quality. You have to ensure that there's a balance between quality image and the size. It's too large in terms of the image size or video size, and it consumes the data of your users. It is bad experience. It is bad experience because you don't know your situation your users are in. It could be that they don't have data. They just manage to get some small data to come online to visit your website, and boom, you've consumed all their data. That's bad experience. They will not be able to complete the process on the platform. And when users discover that your website consumes a lot of data, it could make users to consider other options. That is why you have to consider the quality, the size of the image, quality also, because if an image is poor quality, it sends a wrong signal to the quality of the platform or the website or the mobile app, because it means that either you do not care about the images you use, or you just don't take it seriously. So what are the best practices for images? So we have to consider your target audience, consider the brand guidelines, make sure it is accessible. Accessible in the sense that you have to ensure that the images are um, clear and easy to use. So you can see this location of the image, depending on if it's a circle, you can see what is the focal point of this image is the head. If it's going to be something rectangular out in a portrait form, you can show the entire body. If it's in a circle, you focus on the head, on the main area of the image. If it's in a landscape form, you figure out how to position the image that the main things in the image is visible. So where do you find great images? So you can find great images on oh there. You can find great images on Unsplash, Pixels, Pics, and also illustrations on these tools on this website. When I drop the link to the file, you can all check out this website and get some amazing resources for your project. We have typography. Typography is another core component of of UI design. So it's the art and technique of arranging type to make written language legible, readable, and appealing when displayed. I'm going to be talking about the terminologies in typography. Have Basically, when you talk about typography, you talk about the typeface you use, how it is used. Of course, you consider the legibility, accessibility, but you also consider the emotion, the psychology behind that particular typeface. Depending on typeface, it can elicit different emotions from users, just like colors. The psychology of typography as well. The right typography can be very powerful to ensure that design is that elegance. If you are trying to design something that is meant to be old school, it means that you using typefaces that are more of the 90s. And when people see your site, they will like you get that feeling of the 90s vibe from your site. If you are creating a modern application, a SaaS tool, or maybe something that is more modern and more recent, you consider is the typeface. There are two major typefaces we have. We have serif and sans serif. We'll look at that later in our classes. But for now, these different use typefaces to so for example, if you're creating a modern design, you have to ensure that the typefaces you are using align with modern trends and typography rule patterns that are invoked in the moment, right? That are currently being used. So here we have tracking. Tracking basically is the spacing, the equal amount of space between text in a word. This is a word tracking. The distribution of spacing between the different words, different alphabets in this word is tracking. So if it stretches too much, it will be hard for the eye to read that, understand that it is one word. If it is too close, it will also achieve the same result. So you have to find a balance that it doesn't stretch too, the space between is not too much and so not too small as well. So we have baseline. Baseline, this is the foot at which your typeface sits on. So it's of course this is different from the Y. For example, in this particular case, we have Y. Y goes below the baseline, right? But the baseline basically is the foundation upon which the the typeface sits on. We have weight. Weight basically is how thick is the words. For example, look at this particular text. We have typography terminologies. You can see the thickness of this compared to weight is different. Besides the size difference, you can see that weight is much more thicker. It's thicker compared to typography terminologies. Also here, you can see that here is thin compared to here that's much more big and bold. So for example, in the title of a design, for example, the hero section. Hero section is the first thing you see on a website when you load the website homepage. It's called the hero section. Mostly that particular point, the main big headings has to be. Most cases you use font typefaces that are or that are thick, that have that weight to interpret. To it also aligns with design principles we talk about, hierarchy. So the larger it is, the more importance that it communicates. We have letter spacing. This is the space between letters. Unlike tracking, this does not necessarily mean the equal distribution of space. So it could be different, the different distribution of space between alphabets in a word, or not just in words, but in um, alphabets as well. Line spacing. We also have alignments. But you in alignment, we basically are trying to say, okay, could align your text to the left hand side or to the right. You could align them center. It's always advisable to align your text to the left hand side because in English, we read from left to right. And to make it easier for people to read when you work when it starts from the left to the right. But in situations where you are just writing a small block of text, you can align center, it will still work well. But if it's a long body of text, it's always advisable to start from the left and go to the right in terms of your alignment. Of course, all these features are available on Figma as well as other design tools. So some rules of thumbs for typography. So the size 16 is normally the minimum, because when you're creating design, especially when it comes to websites, you have to consider something called responsive web design. If somebody opens your design with a mobile phone or opens it with a laptop, how do we ensure that the person can see if the experience on the mobile is as good as the experience on the desktop? That's what we're talking about when we talk about responsive design. Across the different designs, and different devices we have to ensure design is good. The design still looks the same and to a large extent works. So 16 is the base in terms of the minimum your types, your text size should be. You could go below this, but when it talks about when you are trying to create long body of text, 16 is the minimum. We also talk about contrast um, as well as text resizing. So some helpful tips for typography. Talk about prioritizing readability. Your text should be readable. You should always consider that first before aesthetics. Then we use maximum of two typefaces, especially when you're just starting out, to ensure that you don't create a loud um, design that basically calls people users that is demanding attention from multiple sides. So, for example, using a different one typeface for the heading and one typeface for the body text. Then we also have, uh, as much as possible, avoid lorem ipsum. Use actual text. Use actual text in your design. Do not use dummy text. Though if you do not have any choice, you can use dummy text. But as much as possible, you want to use actual. Take your time and create that copy. You, as a designer, you should learn how to write and learn how to create um good good text, good it's because it's part of it's just something called UX writing. Basically, the text on your buttons, the text in your heading, how users can interpret those texts to understand how your platform works. So you use that. You don't use lorem ipsum. If you're using lorem ipsum, you will never understand. Okay, lorem ipsum is dummy text. If you search lorem ipsum, you would understand what it means. Basically, it's a body of text. I'm not sure of the language. People most times designers do copy and paste into their work to allow them to focus on the visuals instead of figuring out what text goes there. So you can do that when you're just creating design at first, but you should also have in mind that lorem ipsum change to actual words, English words that people can understand when you're trying to create something for yourself or your portfolio, or even if it's a business. So creating language support so that people from other countries can easily see what you're trying to say in their own language. And when you're confused about what typeface to use, there are native typefaces that comes with different operating system. For iOS, it is San Francisco and New York. That's the name of the typeface. SF, that's San Francisco, and NY, that's New York. Then for Android, Windows, so we have Roboto and Not. It's another one called Not. But basically, Roboto would really work well if no matter where you put it, to a large extent, it will function. And it would also explore typography, save typefaces to use in your work. We're going to explore briefly the anatomy of a form field. So when you go into a website, you fill a form. The form is made up of different components. You put your name, you put all those information. But if you on the design end, on the people who are building that platform, there are different things that come into place. For example, the label. Basically, if you want users to put in their first name, you write it their first name. That's the label. A text, input text is like that name they're writing. Emeka Jude, that's input text. The icon, for example, you want to say date picker, you want them to pick the date they were born. Icon in the form edit.
Everyone, please let's stay on the call, please. Just stay on the call. Thank you. Yeah, so please, while we are waiting on the call, so you guys can drop your messages, you can chat and network with your fellow participant. Thank you. So please, let's be patient, right, guys?
functions that the input field has to perform. We see how you see where in those such situations, icons are used to add more, make it more easy to understand what you want users to do in that particular input input category. But besides this, we can use icons in other form fields. For example, visit if you're trying to create a mobile app and you want to collect their information like their name, their email, their collect password, you can in the name input field you can have this user icon that has a circle and this sort of body. I don't know if you must have seen it somewhere. I would see more of that. We're supposed to have a practical at the end of this presentation. Would have to leave that to our next class. We'll have a brief practical session before we go into the into prototyping and mock-ups. So when you do that, you have those other elements in the form fields. So another thing that is also very important in the form field is the seven there we have helper text. For example, a user puts in their email address and it is a wrong email address. You don't just let them proceed and sign up. You have to tell them that the email address is wrong. So what would you now tell them if the email is wrong? You not just stop them from proceeding with the application with what they are doing. You have to tell them why they cannot continue. So you do that by giving them feedback. Feedback is one of the very, 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 I can't overemphasize how important feedback is in design. If you do not provide feedback in your design, you can make your whatever solution you're creating very frustrating because users are very, very impatient. If they spend a little bit of time on your product, on your platform, and there's and they're finding it difficult to navigate their way to what they want, they would leave. And part of the reason why they will leave is when they are not getting good feedback on what the actions they are taking. Is it actually working? I pressed this button. Is it working? Was I able to submit this form? Was I able to check out from this um, e-commerce online payment process? Was I able to all those things, buttons, feedback, and also when in the input field as well. When the user puts in a text input, you have to tell them, give them feedback. Is it correct? Another example will be password. You want to ensure that your platform users are using strong passwords so that it will be hard for hackers to be able to have access to users' accounts, right? You want them to use strong passwords. In this 7, which is the helper text, you can write it there that they should use strong password. Then beyond just telling them they should use strong password, when they write their password, you would show them the different rating of the password they've imputed. You do this with code, but you have to understand it as a designer so that you can communicate this to the developers. So if the person use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, for example, you tell them that the password is bad. You can use a red text, a red shape, as well as the text that the password is weak, very weak, and like say very weak text there, very weak. Then if they improve it, maybe add some alphabets to it, you can now tell them, okay, this password is weak. It's not very weak, but it's still weak. And maybe they now change the password and include characters, include lowercase, uppercase, and now create an actual strong password. Then you can now display that password is strong. You do this in real time, right? It's not like when they finish putting the password before you give them that feedback. So as they are typing it, the helper text will change to reflect that particular to reflect the strength of the password. That is good feedback. At least at the time they finish typing in the password, if it is good enough, they will know. And if it's not good enough, they will know and they can change it immediately. Same thing with other input fields. For example, they put in the email and they not put maybe .com, and you want the email to be complete and collect all the .com. Of course, .com is part of the email. For example, you have samuel.at gmail.com and they did not include maybe the at in the email. You just display there that the email is incorrect. Then they would know and go back and change it and check it for the mistake and correct it. Then when it's correct, you would also display that it is correct, right? Then you could, when displaying error messages in this particular situation, you see in most cases that platforms use, for example, if there's a mistake, an error, they use color red. Then if it's correct, they use color green. But you have to you don't just rely on colors when giving feedback, because not all your users are have good eyesight. There are people that have colors, one sort, well, different levels and different forms of eye problems. Eye problems that do not allow them to see colors the way they are. So a user can be seeing red as some other color, or seeing blue or green, the green that you think is green, as to them it could look like black, or depending on the particular challenge the person is having, the color would look differently. So when you are creating feedback, when you are giving feedback to users, especially also in in form fields as well as other areas in your design, you have to include text so that they can read it. As the color is showing danger, like red, that there's a mistake, you should also write the text. What is the mistake? So that users that are not seeing that red will be able to read the text. And users that can see the red and read the text will have a better understanding of the problem that you want them to correct. So the container here will be representing the entire square rectangle. So that dark light shade gray color, that will be representing the container. We also have leading icon, which is number 2, text, label text, input text, trailing icon. So here we have a trailing icon. Basically, a leading icon is the icon at the beginning of the form field, like this one. In this particular case, we have calendar. Then the trailing icon is the icon at the end of the form fields. So, for example, if it is search, input field is, I think I didn't explain what an input field is. Input fields are basically a component in a design that allows you to input information into the website, mobile app, or whatever you're interfacing with. So a good example of input fields is the place where you click and put in your password in your phone. When you visit website and you're logging into Facebook, that place you put in your username and your password, that's a form field. That's you are putting information in that place, and the computer, the the code is interpreting that information and granting you access based on what you provided, the information you provided. So form field is just like from filling a form, is a digital version of yeah, basically that's what it is. So for example, you have a search field. Basically, an e-commerce platform. For example, you want users, of course, you have to searching in e-commerce is very, very important. So you have to allow users to be able to search from wherever they are in the platform, whether they are in checkouts, or they are in product description, or they just enter the website. They should be able to search, right? So maybe they put in the word laptop, and they've searched laptop, and they want to search another word. They could just put their mouse in the search box and clear it, and press their backspace and clear the content of that form field. That's the laptop, and put in another thing that they want to search. Or they can click on this cancel, which is the trailing icon number 5. When they click on it, it will clear everything, and they can impute something else they want to impute. It's instead of having more users do that multiple clicking, they just one click, they get the job done. It's faster for them. So as much as possible, we need to the experience. What makes the experience great is how fast it is. Either it is the direct speed or perceptive speed of the platform, as well as other criteria. Whatever will allow users to get to their goal fast and on time. counts as good experience in most cases. So that's all for about the form fields. So here we'll go back to icons. So these are just basically some best practices for using icons. So just like I made mention of earlier, icons are basically vector, basically shapes that are used to communicate different, that has different interpretations. For example, in your phone, the icon, the app you go to when you want to dial a number, it has this sort of old telephone handle. I really do not have any example in the slides, but basically it looks the same, in all phones. So you have this, the way phones were in the beginning, those round phones, those phones where you have to turn those circular disc to pick the numbers you want to dial, that we had in early 2000 and in the 90s. Now you now pick up the office phone. I think they are called office phones. I'm not sure about that. You see that particular handle is what, the shape of that handle is what is used as the phone app. The particular application you click to put in phone numbers to save contacts. In some phones it's called phone, in some phones it's called contacts. So you see that icon there, everybody knows what it means. If you that icon is used to represent, maybe you want to call somebody or you want people to put in their phone numbers. That's what the icon is used to represent. So when you use something different, for example, you want users to put in their phone number and you use a different icon that is not that icon, if it doesn't look like a phone number, like you're trying to say phone numbers, it will be difficult for people to understand what you mean. So as much as possible, you don't want to break the wheel. You want to use what people are already used to. You have to understand the mental models. There's something called mental models. Basically, how are your users thinking currently? How are they solving problems? How are they navigating the internet? How are they navigating platforms? Then you have to tailor your experience in such a way that users will not find it difficult to learn how to use your platform or learn how to use the website or the mobile app you are building. It has to look similar to something that they've used before. Then another very important best practice is use icons to save space or improve recognition. So there are situations where instead of using text, you can use an icon, and most users will understand what it means. For example, the icon of a calendar or the icon of, for example, a location. I think you would see an example of this is if you have Google Map on your phone. That the app icon, that icon you click on to open Google Map, you see that it has a sort of pointy needle-ish look. That's what the icon looks like, right? That's mostly what it's used when you want to you speak it to represent address, map, or things like that. That's what people understand it, and it's there's a lot of examples and of this kind of this particular of this particular situation in most platforms. So if you want any platform you visit and they want to collect, maybe they want you to turn on your location, you would see that icon there. So if you want to do that for your platform and you decide to use another different icon, it's different shape that doesn't look like that particular one, it would make it difficult for users to know what you're trying to say or what you're trying to or what you mean. But if you use that particular icon, when people see it, they're like, okay, they don't need to see map or need to see address or need to see location. Once they see that icon, they know what it means and they can easily take action based on what you want them to do, right? And then you also have don't change the file type icons. So you can also ensure another thing to ensure is that when creating icons, you have to create a balance between simplicity and you don't your icons shouldn't be that detailed. For example, you want to create an icon for airplane mode. You don't have to literally design an airplane as an icon. It's not necessary. Just straight lines that show that aeroplane frame is enough for users to understand what you're trying to say. The same thing when maybe you need to create unique icons that are not you cannot find, you've not seen examples of elsewhere. That principle is important because if it is too detailed, it could then mean different things, and it would to affect it makes it to make the design look a little bit more like, instead of having that simplicity, it begins to take up its more complex form. So when you want to create those icons, you keep them simple as much as possible. Don't be too detailed, but be include enough detail for users to understand what it means. For example, you want to design a basket. You want to create an icon that for a basket. Maybe you want it's a I've been using a lot of food app as an example here. Okay, maybe it's a food app again, and you want that particular places where they add stuff. Okay, like e-commerce. I want to design a shop cart. Maybe this one you would find a lot of examples where I want to create something a little bit unique to that particular platform. You don't need to create basket with all the nets, like you draw those crosses, you put in tires, you put in rails, you put in handle, all those little details you show them. It's not necessary. As long as it looks has that frame, the frame of a shopping cart, it's just about enough to know what to allow users to know what it means. You'd it's also you could also try to test your icons. So you could show your users, people that would eventually use the platform, like, okay, do you know what? You could ask them questions, allow them to use your the designs you've created, show them, and ask them questions and tell them to perform specific functions, and see how they navigate that design you've created. And ask them if what do they think, what words come to mind when they see this particular icon that you have in your design. Then based on that feedback, you know if your icon is good or you need to go and work on it. Okay, so at this point, we are meant to go into a tool called Mural. Mural is a brainstorming tool as well. I decided to include Mural because unlike you could do the same with FigJam, and we have other tools like Miro and Whimsical. We have Draw.io and actually a lot of others. I decided to pick Mural because of the level of its. Well, it has it was built purposely for brainstorming, and it has a very great user interface design, as well as the experience on the platform is actually very good. I've been using it for quite a while now. I think it's about 6 months or so, and there's been a very good experience for me. So I was hoping would do that. I will show you guys the app. It's on the web, so you just search and you'll be able to get access to it, and would see how to use Mural to create user personas, to have brainstorming sessions, or to sprints, or basically how to create have those brainstorming sessions with your team, yeah, your teammates, right? So yeah, we'll not be able to do that now, but we would have that in subsequent classes. So thank you very much for coming. Sorry about the fact that we had to switch to this particular form to complete the class. I know this particular session we talked about a whole lot, like a whole lot of things, from what UI means to the role of UI designers to the skill set. We went over colors, we went over typography, psychology of colors, psychology of typography, best practices. We talked about a lot of things. Now, we cannot teach you everything in UI UX in 3 months. And we cannot teach you everything in UI UX twice a week. That will be like 8 times for 3 months. My goal is to ensure that I expose you to as many things as possible, so that you know what to search, what to learn, what to Google, what to read about, what to practice on. I want you to know about things that these things exist in the first place. Because if you don't know that they exist, you will not know that you need to learn them, you need to understand them, you will not know that they are important. But when you know that they exist, it will guide your research, it will guide your learning, and it will help you to also improve your skill and your knowledge of UI UX design. So I would share the slides when by the end of today you go through them, and yes, dropped some links earlier this week to resources on. You would find resources from icons to typefaces to templates. I think the name of the URL is designresources.com, something like that. Please use that link, and if you need resources, would next class will be more practical in the sense that we'll be creating a landing page on Figma. I would show you how all these things we've talked about, from design principles to these components of UI designs today, and we'll see how everything comes together to create good UI UX design. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate your time. And we've come to the end of the session. I will move into Discord now. Into Discord to answer questions. Okay, streaming has stopped. If you have questions for me, shoot. Sorry if the screen is taking time to load. Um, it's probably most likely your network. If you have strong internet connection, it will load instantly. Questions. I'm waiting for your questions. We cannot teach you everything, but try as much as possible to research more on typography, color psychology, how to pick colors, color wheel, all those things, form fields. So currently, this is a bit advanced, but I'll just chip it in. There's Google, the company Google, as well as other big multinational companies. Basically, you can find there's a concept called design system. Basically, documentation that allows for consistency across the different products that that the company is creating or has built. You'd find for Google you can visit material.io, where you would find if you toggle to the form part of the design system, you would find examples of form fields and how to. I don't really have questions yet. The class was pretty straightforward. All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, we've not gotten to use our persona. Don't worry. I know I've mentioned it a few times. We'll talk more about it in the user experience part of the course, the program. No, it's not every day. It is Tuesday and Friday. Today's class held because we couldn't hold yesterday. All right. I think the remaining questions, if there are more questions, we'll answer that in the chat. We'll come to the end of today's session. Thank you very much for coming and have a wonderful evening.